he spent his last $2,500 on a rotting coastal cruise ship. The locals called it the tying grave. But within 3 weeks, what he found welded behind the boiler room walls, $150 million in silver bars, would either save his little girl's life or end his own. Before we explore what Gabriel discovered in those dark, grease-stained chambers, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The humid sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked pavement of the St. Peter's Wharf parking lot, where Gabriel sat in his rusted Ford pickup, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the windshield, smeared with sea salt and grime, he could see the maze of docks stretching out into the bay. Hundreds of vessels bobbed gently in their slips, their hulls gleaming white and pristine against the water. But Gabriel wasn't looking at those boats. His dark eyes were fixed on a wrinkled piece of paper he'd printed at the library that morning. He had fed his last few dollars in change into the machine to get it. The listing was simple, almost cruel in how short it was: 1965 coastal cruiser, 90 feet, condemned status. Engine seized. Hull compromised. Minimum bid $2,500. Cash only, as is. No refunds, no warranties. Buyer assumes all liability. Gabriel was 34 years old, but he felt ancient. As a black man who had spent his life laboring in heavy industry, his hands were calloused and scarred from years of working as a diesel mechanic. They trembled slightly as he held the paper. His short hair was flecked with premature gray, and he didn't bother to hide the exhaustion on his face anymore. The deep lines etched around his eyes weren't from smiling. They were from squinting in the harsh sun, from sleepless nights, and from praying in his car where his daughter couldn't hear him weep. Hope, his sweet, brilliant, fragile 9-year-old, had a heart condition that required a surgery Gabriel couldn't afford. The medical bills sat in a showbox under his bed, each envelope a reminder of everything he couldn't provide. The insurance had lapsed 6 months ago when he'd been laid off from the shipyard. His new job at a small auto repair shop paid cash under the table, barely enough to keep the lights on in their tiny apartment. But Gabriel knew ships. His father, Solomon, a deacon and a master welder before he passed, had taught him everything about steel, engines, and the way a vessel moves through water. Solomon died when Gabriel was young, but his deep voice still echoed in his head sometimes. "Son," he'd say, "a ship is just iron and faith. You find the broken parts, you heal them, and you make it float." He needed to float desperately. The plan was insane. He knew that. Buy the condemned cruise ship for next to nothing, fix it up using his skills and whatever parts he could scavenge or beg for, then sell it for enough to pay for Hope's surgery. Maybe $50,000, maybe $60,000, just enough to save his daughter's life. Gabriel stepped out of the truck into the thick air that smelled of diesel fuel and dead fish. His work boots, steel-toed and worn down at the heels, crunched across the gravel. He wore jeans stained with oil that wouldn't wash out and a gray t-shirt that clung to his broad shoulders. A grease-stained rag hung from his back pocket, more out of habit than fashion. The harbor master's office was a small shack with peeling paint and a window unit air conditioner that wheezed like an asthmatic lung. Inside, a man named Thomas sat behind a desk covered in papers, nautical charts, and styrofoam coffee cups. He looked up when Gabriel entered, his face weathered and suspicious. "Help you?" Thomas asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "I'm here about the cruiser," Gabriel said, his voice deep and steady. "The condemned one." Thomas leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "You and about 3 other people this month. You got the cash." Gabriel reached into his back pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was $2,500 in 20s, 10s, and 5s. Every cent he had in the world. Money he'd saved from skipping meals, from walking instead of driving, and from selling everything that wasn't nailed down. His late wife's wedding ring had brought $400 at the pawn shop. The old television, another $100. His father Solomon's welding rig, the one he'd kept since the funeral, had been the hardest to let go. He got $2,000 from a collector who didn't ask questions. He placed the envelope on the desk. Thomas picked it up, counted it slowly, then looked at Gabriel with something that might have been pity. "You know what you're getting into, son?" Thomas asked. "That ship has been sitting for 8 years. The owner died, no heirs claimed it, and it's been rotting ever since. We've been trying to get rid of it just to free up the slip. Insurance won't even cover it anymore. You sign these papers, it's yours, and whatever happens after that is on you." "I understand," Gabriel said quietly. "I don't think you do," Thomas continued. "That vessel is one storm away from sinking. The engines are locked up solid. There's probably black mold in every cabin. The electrical system is shot. Hell, the Coast Guard wouldn't let you take it out of the harbor even if you got it running." Gabriel met his eyes. "I'm a master mechanic. I've rebuilt engines that were underwater for a month. I've patched steel hulls with scrap metal and prayers. I know what I'm doing." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your funeral." He pulled out a stack of papers. "Sign here, here, and here. Ship is in slip 33. End of the dock. You got 72 hours to move it or we charge you for the slip. After that, it's $100 a day." Gabriel signed without reading. He didn't have time to read. The auction deadline was today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was already 1:45. If someone else showed up with cash, he'd lose his chance. 10 minutes later, he was walking down Dock C, his boots echoing on the weathered planks. The boats on either side were immaculate, their decks scrubbed clean and brass fittings polished to a shine. But the end of the dock was different. This was where the forgotten vessels lived, the ones with faded names and cracked hulls. The ones whose owners had run out of money, or hope, or both. Slip 33 was at the very end. And when Gabriel saw it, his stomach dropped. The ship was enormous. 90 feet of steel antique and rust. Once upon a time, it had been a beautiful coastal cruiser for tourists. You could still see traces of it in the lines of the hull and the way the upper deck rose elegantly, but time and neglect had turned it into a monster. The white paint was stained brown and green with algae. The steel decks were corroded, with some plates rusted through entirely. The portholes were clouded with salt and grime, and one was cracked from corner to corner. The name on the stern, painted in faded black letters, read the Lazarus. Gabriel almost laughed. Almost. He stepped aboard, and the massive ship shifted under his weight, settling deeper into the water with a sound like a metallic groan. The deck was slippery with mildew, and he had to grab the railing to steady himself. The metal was rough with rust under his palm. The main cabin door was locked, but the wood frame was so rotted that one good pull tore it open. The smell that hit him was overwhelming. Mold, stale water, and decay. He covered his nose and mouth with his rag and stepped inside. The interior was dark, the portholes too grimy to let in much light. Gabriel pulled out his phone and clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a scene of complete devastation. The carpet squelched under his heavy work boots, soaked with water that had seeped in through a dozen ceiling leaks. The furniture was covered in a thick layer of mold, black, green, and orange spores climbing the upholstery. The galley cabinets hung open, their contents long since removed or rotted away. Wires dangled from the ceiling like dead vines where light fixtures had fallen. The smell was so acrid he had to step back outside onto the deck to catch his breath. But Gabriel had seen worse. He'd worked on shrimping trawlers that had been abandoned for years, their engines completely seized, their holds full of stagnant bilge water and rat nests. He'd brought them back to life. He could do this. He spent the next hour exploring every inch of the ship. The forward cabins were the worst, the bunks were solid masses of mold, the steel walls stained with rust streaks. The head, the ship's bathroom, was a nightmare of corrosion and broken ceramic. But the boiler room, that's what mattered most. Gabriel climbed down the narrow iron ladder into the darkness of the ship's belly. His phone's light swept across the machinery. 2 massive Fairbanks Morse diesel engines that would have been worth a fortune when they were new. Now, they were monuments to neglect. Every surface was covered in rust and calcification. He ran his large, scarred hand along the block, feeling the rough texture, sensing the way moisture had pitted the metal. The oil pans were likely full of water. The belts had disintegrated into black dust. The fuel injectors were seized. But the blocks themselves, he leaned in close. No cracks. No visible fractures. They were cast iron beasts, built to last forever. They could be saved. Gabriel sat on the bottom step of the metal ladder and let himself feel it for just a moment. The crushing weight of what he'd done. The enormity of the task ahead. The terrifying possibility that he'd just thrown away his last $2,500 on a floating wreck that would never run again. Then he thought about Hope. He thought about the way his daughter's breath sometimes caught in her chest, the way her lips turned a faint shade of blue when she played too hard, the way she smiled even though Gabriel knew she was terrified. Hope, who drew pictures of ships and taped them to the wall of their apartment. Hope, who believed her daddy could fix anything. Gabriel stood up, his boots clanging against the grating. He'd start tomorrow. He'd bring tools, supplies, whatever he could carry in the truck. He'd work every spare minute. Every hour he wasn't at the auto shop. Every weekend, he'd make this ship float again. He had to. When he climbed back up to the deck, the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. He stood at the bow and looked out at the harbor, at all the other yachts with their clean lines and humming engines. A man on the dock was watching him, middle-aged, wearing an expensive linen shirt and deck shoes that had never seen a day of real labor. He was talking to someone else, and Gabriel caught fragments of their conversation carried on the wind. Can you believe someone actually bought that thing? Who? Some guy. Mechanic. I think he's going to waste months trying to fix it. Poor guy doesn't know any better. Laughter followed. Gabriel's jaw tightened, the muscles bunching, but he didn't respond. He'd heard worse. He'd been hearing worse his entire life. Single father, blue collar, grease monkey. They all thought they knew his story. Thought they knew what he was capable of. Let them laugh, he thought. I've got work to do. Gabriel locked the cabin door as best he could, though it wouldn't keep anyone out who really wanted in. Then he walked back down the dock, past the gleaming boats and the men in their linen shirts, past the marina office where Thomas watched him through the window with that same look of pity. He drove home in silence. The truck's radio was broken, and the air conditioning was nothing more than hot air blowing through the vents. The apartment complex where he lived was on the south side of town, the kind of place where the parking lot was more potholes than pavement, and the palm trees were brown and dying from lack of water. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, his legs aching from the long day, and unlocked the door with a key that always stuck in the deadbolt. Hope was sitting at the small table in the kitchen area, coloring in a book her teacher had given her. She looked up when Gabriel entered, and her whole face lit up with a smile that made his heart ache. Daddy! Hope jumped up and ran to him, wrapping her thin arms around his waist. You're home. Gabriel hugged his daughter tight, breathing in the smell of her hair, cheap strawberry shampoo and the faint sweetness of childhood. Hey, baby! How was school? Good. We learned about dolphins. Did you know they sleep with one eye open? I did not know that, Gabriel said, even though he did. He loved the way Hope shared facts like treasures, her dark eyes wide with wonder. Where were you? Hope asked. Gabriel hesitated. He'd been keeping the plan to herself, not wanting to get Hope's expectations up in case it fell through. But now, standing in their tiny apartment with its water-stained ceiling and the furniture that came from thrift stores, he felt the need to share it, to make it real. I bought a ship, Gabriel said. Hope's eyes went wide. Really? A ship? Like Grandpa Solomon's stories. Sort of. It's a big ship, 90 feet. But it needs a lot of work. Can I see it? Soon, Gabriel promised. First, I have to make it safe. That night, after Hope had gone to sleep in the small bedroom they shared, Gabriel sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pencil. He made lists, calculations, plans. The engines would need a complete rebuild, new fuel injectors, new belts, new hoses. The electrical system would have to be rewired from scratch. The steel hull would need to be surveyed, checked for thin spots, and reinforced where necessary. The interior would need to be gutted and replaced. Parts alone would cost thousands. Labor, if he had to pay for it, would cost tens of thousands. But Gabriel didn't plan to pay for labor. He would do it himself, every bit of it. And parts? He'd find them. Salvage yards, online auctions, other mechanics who owed him favors. He'd beg, borrow, and barter. The next morning, Gabriel dropped Hope at school, then drove to the marina. He'd loaded his truck with tools borrowed from the shop, wrenches, screwdrivers, a portable generator, cleaning supplies. He parked as close to Dock C as he could and made 3 trips carrying everything to the ship. The smell hit him again when he opened the cabin, but he was ready this time with a respirator mask he'd grabbed from work. He spent the first hour just cleaning, hauling out bags of moldy cushions, rotted curtains, and broken dishes. The carpet came up in wet, disgusting chunks. Underneath, the floor was steel decking, and when Gabriel tested it with a hammer, it rang solid in most places, though rust flakes showered down. More work. More money. But he kept going. He worked until his arms ached and his back screamed. He worked through lunch, his stomach growling, but his hands too filthy to eat even if he'd brought food. He worked until the light started to fade, and he had to race to pick up Hope from the after-school program. This became his routine. Drop Hope at school. Work at the auto repair shop until 3. Pick up Hope. Take her home. Make dinner. Help with homework. Wait until Hope fell asleep. Then go back to the ship. He worked by the light of battery-powered lamps, his phone playing gospel music through a small speaker to keep him company. He worked until midnight, sometimes later, then drove home and collapsed into bed for a few hours before doing it all again. The other boat owners noticed. They watched him from their decks, drinking beer and shaking their heads. Some made comments loud enough for him to hear. Give it a week. He'll give up. Waste of money. That tub should have been scrapped years ago. Gabriel ignored them. He was used to being underestimated. He'd been underestimated his entire life. When he'd told his high school counselor he wanted to be an engineer, the man had suggested he look into janitorial work instead. When he'd applied for jobs at the shipyard, he'd been laughed out of 3 interviews before someone finally gave him a chance. When the mother of his child had left him shortly after Hope was born, disappearing into a life he couldn't follow, everyone had assumed Gabriel would end up another statistic. A broken man, a struggling single father. He'd proved them wrong every time. He'd worked harder, learned faster, and pushed himself further than anyone expected. And he'd do it again. 3 weeks into the project, Gabriel had gutted the entire interior. The ship was now just a shell, stripped down to the bare steel framing. He'd pressure-washed every surface, treated the mold with industrial cleaner, and started rebuilding the subflooring. The steel plating he needed, he bought second-hand from a scrap yard, trading a transmission rebuild on the owner's tow truck for enough metal to patch the worst of the deck. The engine room was next. This was the part he'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Gabriel spent an entire weekend just cleaning the boiler room, pumping out stagnant bilge water, wiping down every surface, and organizing the space so he could work. Then he started the teardown. Removing parts from a massive marine diesel engine is not a simple process. It's bolted to the mounts, connected to the massive shafts that turn the propellers, wired into the electrical system, plumbed into the fuel lines. Every connection has to be carefully labeled, photographed, and documented. Gabriel worked methodically, taking pictures with his phone, making notes in his notebook, and storing bolts and washers in labeled plastic buckets. It took him 4 days just to disconnect everything on the port engine. Then came the hardest part, lifting the cylinder heads. Most people would use a crane or a hoist, equipment that cost hundreds of dollars to rent. Gabriel didn't have hundreds of dollars. He had a chain block, a manual hoist that could lift heavy loads, and a lot of determination. He rigged the chain block to a steel I-beam running across the engine room ceiling, wrapped heavy-duty chains around the cylinder head, and started pulling the chain. Click-clack, click-clack. Inch by inch, the massive cast-iron head rose from the block. His arms burned. His shoulders screamed. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes, but he kept going. It took 6 hours to lift the heads high enough to swing them over and lower them onto a pallet he dragged down there. When the last one settled with a heavy thud, Gabriel collapsed next to it, his entire body shaking with exhaustion. But he'd done it. Alone. With no help, with almost no money. He'd stripped the top end of a massive industrial diesel engine using nothing but simple tools and stubborn will. He took a picture and sent it to his friend Marcus, another mechanic he'd worked with at the shipyard. Marcus's response came immediately, "Man, you actually did it." "You crazy?" Gabriel smiled. Maybe he was. But crazy was better than helpless. He was wiping the grease from his hands when he heard footsteps on the deck above. Gabriel climbed the ladder and looked out to see a woman approaching, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and expensive sunglasses. She was wearing a white linen suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about a bill in her life. "Excuse me," the woman called out. "Are you the owner of this vessel?" Gabriel stood up to his full height, suddenly aware of how he must look. A large black man covered in oil and sweat, his hair a mess, his clothes filthy. "Yes." The woman stepped closer, eyeing the gutted cabin and the tools scattered everywhere. "I own the yacht 3 slips over." The serendipity. Gabriel waited. He knew what was coming. "I wanted to let you know that several of us have discussed your situation," the woman continued, her voice carrying the practiced politeness of someone delivering an insult wrapped in a gift box. "And we feel that this vessel is bringing down the overall appearance of the marina. Perhaps you should consider moving it to a different facility. Somewhere more suited to this kind of work." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I have as much right to be here as anyone else. I'm paying for the slip." "Yes, but surely you understand that some of us have significant investments in our vessels, and the presence of a derelict ship affects property values." "It's not derelict," Gabriel said, his voice deep and hard now. "It's being restored." The woman's smile was thin and brittle. "Of course. I just thought you should know how the community feels." She turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, dear, you have grease on your face." Gabriel watched her walk away, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned gray. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw his wrench into the water. Instead, he took a deep, shuddering breath, picked up a rag, and wiped the grease from his cheek. Let them complain. Let them look down on me. In a few months, when this ship was running, when it was beautiful again, when he sold it for enough money to save Hope's life, none of their opinions would matter. Gabriel turned back to the hatch. There was still work to do. The engine rebuild consumed the next month of Gabriel's life. Every free moment was spent in that cramped, oil-stained boiler room that would have broken most people's spirits. He'd set up a makeshift workshop on the lower deck, covering the disassembled parts with tarps when he wasn't working. The engines were in worse shape than he'd initially thought. The pistons were seized solid, welded into their cylinders by rust and corrosion. The crankshaft bearings were scored deep. The cylinder heads were warped. But Gabriel had rebuilt worse. He worked systematically, documenting everything, taking measurements, checking tolerances. He borrowed a honing machine from the shop to refinish the cylinder walls. He found replacement pistons at a marine salvage yard 3 hours away, driving there on his day off with Hope asleep in the back seat. The crankshaft needed to be machined, but he traded 2 weekends of free labor at a local machine shop for the work. Money was tighter than ever. The slip fees were eating into his grocery budget. Hope needed new shoes, her sneakers were splitting at the toes, but Gabriel kept putting it off. They ate rice and beans most nights, occasionally splurging on chicken when it was on sale. Gabriel lost weight he didn't have to lose, his clothes hanging looser on his frame, his face gaunt, but he kept working. It was a Tuesday evening, nearly 8 p.m., when Gabriel finally had the starboard engine block ready for the heads to be reinstalled. He'd spent the entire day at the ship, calling in sick to the auto shop, something he never did. But he was so close. So close to having a working engine. Once it was running, he could move forward with the rest of the restoration. He could see the finish line. The sun had set an hour ago, and Gabriel was working by the harsh glare of his battery-powered work lights. The marina was quiet, most of the other boat owners having gone home for the evening. He was alone on Dock C, just him and the sound of water lapping against steel hulls and the distant cry of night birds. Gabriel was down in the boiler room, tightening the bolts on the engine mounts. It was delicate work, requiring patience and brute strength. One wrong move and he could strip a bolt that cost $50 to replace. He was torquing a bolt when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A hollow thunk, like something heavy shifting inside the steel bulkhead wall of the engine room. Gabriel froze, his hand on the wrench. He waited, listening. Nothing. Maybe he'd imagined it. The stress, the exhaustion, the hunger, all of it was catching up to him. He went back to the bolt. Thunk. There it was again. Definitely real. Definitely coming from somewhere behind the main fuel tank on the starboard side. Gabriel put down his wrench and moved toward the wall. He pressed his ear against the steel plating where the sound had come from. He knocked on it with his knuckles. The sound was different here. Hollow, like there was empty space behind it. That wasn't right. Gabriel had studied the blueprints of this ship model at the library. He'd memorized every inch of its layout. There shouldn't be empty space there. The hull should be solid steel framing, backed by the fuel tank. He knocked again, moving along the wall. Solid. 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 Hollow. A section about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall sounded completely different from the rest. Gabriel grabbed his flashlight and examined the wall more closely. At first, everything looked normal, just white painted steel, slightly yellowed with age and stained with oil. But then he saw it. A seam, barely visible, running in a perfect rectangle. It had been filled with Bondo and painted over, but not well enough. Someone had cut into this wall and sealed it back up. Gabriel's heart started beating faster, thumping against his ribs like a sledgehammer. He ran his thick fingers along the seam, feeling where the filler compound had been applied. This wasn't original construction. This was a modification done after the ship was built, hidden, concealed. He climbed back up to the deck and grabbed his toolbox. He selected a utility knife and a small pry bar. Back in the boiler room, he used the knife to score along the seam, cutting through layers of paint and hardened filler. The compound was old and brittle, flaking away in chunks. Behind it, he could see where someone had used a cutting torch to slice through the steel plate, then resealed it with spot welds and epoxy. The pry bar went into the seam easily. Gabriel applied pressure, and the panel shifted with a groan of metal. More pressure. A loud crack. Then the entire section of the wall came loose. A heavy 3-foot by 4-foot steel plate attached to a makeshift frame. Gabriel set it aside and shined his flashlight into the opening. His breath caught in his throat. Behind the wall was a compartment, carefully constructed and lined with what looked like rubber matting. And inside the compartment, stacked neatly in rows, were bars. Silver bars. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Each one stamped with markings he couldn't quite make out in the dim light. Gabriel's hand started shaking violently. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. He reached in and grabbed one of the bars. It was heavy, incredibly heavy, maybe 60 or 70 pounds. The surface was tarnished but smooth, the metal gleaming dull white where his thumb rubbed away the grime. He turned it over and saw the markings clearly now. .999 fine silver. And below that, a serial number. And below that, a stamp he recognized from news stories he'd seen years ago. Engelhard. He was holding a silver bullion bar. A real, genuine silver bar. And there were hundreds more just like it stacked in the hidden compartment. Gabriel's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the metal grating of the floor, the silver bar still clutched in his hands. His mind was racing, trying to process what he was seeing, what it meant. He'd bought this ship for $2,500, a condemned wreck that everyone said was worthless, and hidden inside it was a fortune. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. He needed to know how much was there. Gabriel set the first bar aside and started removing them from the compartment, stacking them on the floor. 1, 2, 5, 10, 20. Each bar identical to the last. He counted slowly, carefully, his hands trembling as he worked. When he was done, 5,000 bars lay stacked on the floor. Gabriel pulled out his phone and searched for the current price of silver. It was fluctuating, but a 1,000-ounce commercial bar, which these appeared to be, was worth roughly $30,000. He did the math 3 times, certain he was making a mistake. $30,000 per bar times 5,000 bars. $150 million. Gabriel stared at the number on his phone's calculator. $150 million in silver, hidden in the walls of a ship he'd bought for the price of a used Honda. He started laughing. It was a strange, hysterical sound that echoed in the boiler room. This was insane. This was impossible. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. He was a struggling father, a mechanic, a man who prayed over unpaid bills. He didn't find millions of dollars hidden in ship walls. But the silver was real. He could touch it. He could feel its cold weight. This was happening. The laughter died in his throat, replaced by something else. Fear. Cold, sharp fear that cut through the shock and disbelief. Because a fortune like this, hidden like this, didn't get there by accident. Someone had put it there. Someone who probably wanted it back. Someone who might be very, very dangerous. Gabriel quickly started putting the bars back into the compartment. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped one on his foot. He couldn't let anyone know about this. Not yet. Not until he figured out what to do. He replaced all the bars except one, which he wrapped in a greasy shop towel and stuffed deep into his toolbox. Evidence. Proof that he wasn't losing his mind. He fitted the heavy steel panel back into the wall, but it wouldn't stay. The welds he had broken were gone, and the epoxy was useless. He'd need to reseal it properly. Gabriel grabbed a roll of industrial duct tape from his supplies and used it to hold the panel in place temporarily. It looked terrible, obvious, but it would have to do until he could think straight. He climbed out of the boiler room and sat on the deck, his back against the cabin wall. The night air was cool against his skin, but he was sweating through his shirt. His mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, consequences. He should call the police. That was the right thing to do. Find millions of dollars, report it to the authorities. But something stopped him. If he called the police, they'd take the silver. They'd investigate. They'd probably impound the ship as evidence. And while all that was happening, Hope's medical bills would keep piling up. The surgery she needed would keep getting further out of reach. Gabriel had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and he was still barely surviving. And now, by pure chance, by a desperate gamble, he'd stumbled onto something that could change everything. But was it even his? Legally, he owned the ship and everything in it. He'd bought it at a legitimate auction. The silver had been inside when he purchased it, which meant technically it belonged to him, right? Or was there some law about found treasure, about stolen goods? Gabriel pressed his large hands against his face. He needed to think. He needed to be smart about this. He'd spent his entire life fighting for scraps, working twice as hard for half the recognition. And he was tired. So tired. Maybe God was finally giving him a break. Maybe this was his chance to stop struggling, to give Hope the life she deserved. He stood up and looked around the marina. Everything was quiet. No one was watching. No one knew. Gabriel grabbed his toolbox and the wrapped silver bar, then locked up the cabin. He walked back to his truck on shaky legs, his mind still reeling. The drive home was a blur. He kept checking the rearview mirror, convinced someone was following him, but the roads were empty. When he reached the apartment, he carried his toolbox inside, trying to act normal, even though his heart was pounding like a drum. Hope was asleep on the couch. The babysitter, a teenager from downstairs, was watching television with the volume low. Gabriel paid her the $20 he could barely afford, waited for her to leave, then deadbolted the door. He carried Hope to bed, tucking her in carefully, watching his daughter's face in the soft glow of the nightlight. So peaceful, so innocent, so deserving of a future that didn't include worry and fear. Gabriel went to the kitchen and unwrapped the silver bar. Under the harsh fluorescent light, it looked even more real, even more impossible. He turned it over in his hands, studying every detail. The serial number was E88-29-41. The date stamp read 1982. 43 years ago. Where had it come from? Why had someone hidden it on that ship? He opened his laptop, the old machine taking forever to boot up. When it finally loaded, he started researching. Silver bullion, Engelhard bars, hidden treasure, maritime law. The information was overwhelming and contradictory. Some sources said anything found on your property belonged to you. Others said you had to report found valuables. None of it specifically addressed his situation. Then he searched for the ship's history. 1965 coastal cruiser, the Lazarus, St. Peter's Wharf. The results were sparse. A few old listings from when it had been for sale years ago. Nothing about the previous owner except the name, Arthur Vance, died 2017. No heirs. Estate liquidation. Gabriel searched for Arthur Vance. Nothing came up except an old obituary. Arthur Vance, 82, of St. Peter's, died November 4, 2017. Private funeral. No services. That was it. No mention of family, career, nothing. It was like he'd been deliberately erased. He kept digging. His exhaustion forgotten, Gabriel kept digging. He found property records showing Arthur Vance had owned the ship since 1993. Before that, the ownership history was murky. The ship had changed hands several times in the late 80s and early 90s. Always cash sales. Always minimal paperwork. Gabriel leaned back in his creaking chair. Whoever Arthur Vance was, he'd hidden a fortune in silver on that ship and then died without telling anyone. Maybe he'd planned to come back for it. Maybe he'd forgotten where it was. Maybe he'd been scared. Or maybe he'd been protecting it from someone. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Gabriel closed the laptop. He needed sleep. He needed to think clearly. He wrapped the silver bar back in the towel and hid it in the back of his closet, behind a box of old winter coats. Then he lay down on the couch, still fully dressed, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound made him jump. Every car passing outside made him wonder if they were slowing down, if they were watching. He'd crossed some invisible line tonight. He'd found something that didn't belong to him, and he hadn't immediately reported it. That made him guilty of something, even if he wasn't sure what. But when he finally drifted off just before dawn, his last thought was of Hope. Of the surgery she needed. Of the life Gabriel could give her if he was just brave enough, or desperate enough, to keep this secret a little while longer. The next morning, Gabriel woke with a start, the morning sun streaming through the thin curtains. He'd overslept. Hope was already up, eating cereal at the table, watching cartoons on the small television. "Morning, Daddy," she said cheerfully. "You were really tired. I turned off your alarm." Gabriel's heart clenched. Sweet, thoughtful hope. "Thank you, baby. I'm sorry. We need to get you to school." They rushed through the morning routine, and Gabriel dropped Hope off 15 minutes late, apologizing profusely to the front office staff. Then he drove to the auto repair shop, his mind still churning with questions and fears. He worked mechanically that day, changing oil, rotating tires, replacing brake pads. His boss noticed something was off. "You feeling okay, Gabe? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," Gabriel said, his voice gruff. "Late night working on the ship. How's that going? You actually going to get that rusted heap running?" Gabriel forced a smile. "That's the plan." He left work early, claiming a migraine, and drove back to the marina. He needed to see the silver again to confirm it was real, that he hadn't hallucinated the entire thing. The afternoon sun beat down on Dock C. As he approached slip 33, everything looked normal. The ship sat quietly in its slip, the tarp still covering the engine parts on the deck. Gabriel unlocked the cabin and went straight to the boiler room. His makeshift duct tape repair was still in place. He pulled it off carefully and removed the heavy steel panel. The silver bars gleamed in the flashlight beam, exactly as he'd left them. Real. Undeniably real. He sat on the metal grating and forced himself to think logically. He had options. Option 1, report the silver to the police, hand it over, and go back to his life of struggle. Option 2, keep the silver, try to sell it somehow, and use the money for Hope's surgery. Option 3, keep quiet, finish the ship restoration, sell the vessel without mentioning the silver, and pretend he never found it. Each option had risks. Reporting it meant losing everything. Keeping it meant becoming a criminal. Staying quiet meant leaving a fortune behind. There had to be another way. A smarter way. Gabriel needed help. He needed someone he could trust. Someone who understood the gray areas of the law. Someone who wouldn't judge him. He thought of Elijah, his uncle's old friend who used to run a pawn shop downtown before retiring. Elijah had always been the practical one, the one who knew how to navigate the streets and the system, how to find loopholes. Gabriel pulled out his phone and called him. "Elijah, it's Gabriel. I need to talk to you about something. Something big." They met at a barbecue joint on the edge of town, far from the marina, far from anyone who might know them. Elijah was already in a booth when Gabriel arrived, picking at a plate of ribs. He was 68, with thinning white hair and eyes that didn't miss much behind his thick glasses. "This better be good, son," Elijah said as Gabriel slid into the booth. "You sounded like you were running from the law on the phone." Gabriel glanced around the restaurant. A few families, a couple of truck drivers, nobody paying attention to them. He leaned forward and spoke quietly. "If I tell you something, you have to promise not to tell anyone. Not the police, not your wife, nobody." Elijah's expression grew serious. He wiped his hands on a napkin. "Gabe, what did you get yourself into?" "I didn't get into anything. I found something on the ship." Gabriel pulled out his phone and showed Elijah the pictures he'd taken of the silver bars hidden in the boiler room wall. Thousands of bars worth over $150 million. Elijah's eyes went wide. He grabbed the phone, zooming in on the images, studying the stamps. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. Are these real? I have one in my truck. I can show you." They left the restaurant and went to Gabriel's pickup. He unlocked the toolbox in the bed and moved aside a pile of wrenches, revealing the silver bar wrapped in the shop towel. Elijah lifted it, felt the heft, examined the Engelhard stamp. "Jesus, Gabriel. This is real silver. Heavy too. Where did it come from?" "I don't know. The previous owner died 8 years ago. No heirs. I think he hid it there and never told anyone." Elijah was quiet for a long moment, thinking, his fingers tracing the cold metal. You need to be very careful. A hoard like this doesn't just appear. It came from somewhere. If it's stolen, if it's connected to organized crime, you could be in serious danger. I know, Gabriel said. But Hope needs surgery. She needs it soon. And I don't have the money. I don't have any way to get the money until now. Elijah met his eyes. You're thinking about keeping it. I'm thinking about selling enough of it to pay for Hope's surgery. Just a few bars. Enough to save my daughter's life. The rest I'd figure out later. How would you even sell it? You can't just walk into a coin shop with commercial bullion bars. They'll ask questions. They'll want paperwork. I was hoping you'd have an idea. You know people. Elijah sighed, rubbing his forehead. Gabe, I love you like my own, but this is way over my head. You need a lawyer or maybe a high-end metals broker who doesn't ask questions. And those types, they ain't usually the friendly kind. I don't have money for a lawyer. Then you're stuck. Because selling stolen silver without getting caught or killed is not something I know how to do. Elijah handed the heavy bar back to Gabriel. My advice? Report it. Turn it over to the authorities. Let them figure out where it came from. Maybe there's a finder's fee. Gabriel wrapped the bar back up and placed it in the toolbox. And if there's not? If they just take it and I get nothing? Then what? Hope dies because I followed the rules. At least you're not looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, wondering when someone's going to come looking for their silver. They stood in the parking lot, the humid wind blowing between them. Gabriel knew Elijah was right. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to report it. But the smart thing wouldn't save Hope. The safe thing wouldn't pay the medical bills that kept him up at night. I need to think about it, Gabriel said finally. Elijah squeezed his shoulder. Whatever you decide, be careful. And if you need me, call. Even if it's just to pray. Gabriel drove back to the marina, his mind no clearer than before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of deep violet and red. He sat in his truck for a while, watching the light fade, watching the other boat owners return to their yachts for evening cocktails. Their lives looked so easy. So uncomplicated. They'd never had to choose between right and wrong when their child's life hung in the balance. He finally got out and walked to the ship. As he approached, he noticed something that made him stop. The cabin door was ajar, just slightly, maybe an inch, but Gabriel knew he'd locked it. He always locked it. His heart started pounding, a heavy rhythm against his ribs. Someone had been on his ship. Someone was maybe still on his ship. Gabriel grabbed a heavy pipe wrench from his toolbox and approached slowly, quietly, his work boots making no sound on the deck. He pushed the door open wider and peered inside. The main cabin was dark, but he could hear something. Movement. Someone was in the boiler room. He could hear the sound of duct tape being torn, the scrape of the steel panel being moved. They were going for the silver. Gabriel's first instinct was to run, to call the police, to get away. But then he thought of Hope, of the surgery, of everything he'd worked for. This silver was his. He'd bought the ship. He'd found it. And he wasn't going to let someone steal it. He flipped on the lights. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice booming and deep. "I'm calling the police." The movement in the boiler room stopped. Then a voice came from below, calm, masculine. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, friend. Not unless you want to explain to the cops where you got $150 million in silver bullion." A man emerged from the boiler room ladder. He was in his 50s, wearing dark jeans and a nondescript windbreaker. His hair was graying at the temples. He didn't look threatening. He didn't have a weapon that Gabriel could see. He just looked tired. "You must be Gabriel," he said. "The man who bought Arthur's ship. How do you know my name?" "I've been watching you. Watching this ship, waiting to see if anyone would find what Arthur hid. He gestured to the boiler room. "Looks like you did." Gabriel gripped the pipe wrench tighter. "Who are you?" "My name's Elias. I was Arthur's brother. Half-brother, technically. And that silver down there? It belongs to my family. Arthur stole it from us 20 years ago, and I've been looking for it ever since." Gabriel's grip tightened on the wrench as he faced the man calling himself Elias. The cabin lights cast harsh shadows across his face, making it impossible to read his intentions. His mind raced through options, all of them bad. He was alone on a ship with a stranger who claimed ownership of a fortune. No one knew he was here. Hope was at home with the teenage babysitter, waiting for her daddy to return. "I bought this ship legally," Gabriel said, keeping his voice steady, even though his heart hammered. "Everything on it belongs to me. That's how property law works." Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Property law? That's interesting. Tell me, did you report finding 5,000 silver bars to the authorities? Did you pay taxes on it? Did you even wonder where it came from before you decided it was yours?" Gabriel didn't answer. He couldn't. He was right. And they both knew it. "I didn't think so," Elias continued. He moved slowly toward the small table in the galley, his hands visible, non-threatening. "Look, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here for what's mine. Arthur was my half-brother, but he was also a thief. Our father owned a precious metals refinery in the Midwest. When he died in 2005, Arthur was supposed to split the inheritance with me. Instead, he liquidated everything, converted it to silver, and disappeared. I've been tracking that hoard for 20 years. If that's true, why not go to the police?" Elias laughed bitterly. "Because my father's business wasn't exactly IRS compliant. The silver came from off-the-books refining. Cash jobs. Meltdowns. So, I couldn't report Arthur without incriminating my own family legacy. I had to find the silver quietly, recover it privately." Gabriel's mind worked through his story, looking for holes, for lies. "If you've been watching the ship, why wait until now? It's been sitting here for 8 years. Arthur died in 2017. I didn't know Arthur had hidden it on the ship until recently. I thought he'd stashed it in a storage unit or buried it somewhere in the Everglades. I've searched dozens of properties over the years. Then I heard someone bought the Lazarus at auction, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally find it. So I watched, I waited, and when I saw you removing those engine heads, I knew you'd eventually find the compartment. Arthur always was clever about hiding things in plain sight." "So what now?" Gabriel asked. "You just expect me to hand it over? You expect me to just hand it over?" Elias's expression hardened. "I expect you to be reasonable. You've had a lucky break, but this isn't your silver. It's my family's. Walk away now, and I'll give you $10,000 for your trouble. Keep fighting me, and things get complicated. I have resources, Gabriel. I have lawyers, investigators, people who can make your life very difficult. I have a daughter who needs surgery," Gabriel said, his voice cracking slightly with the strain. "Surgery that costs money I don't have. I didn't ask to find this silver, but now that I have, it might be the only thing that saves her life." Something shifted in Elias's face. For a moment, he looked almost human, almost sympathetic. "I'm sorry about your daughter. I truly am. But that doesn't change the facts. This silver is stolen property. Stolen from a criminal," Gabriel shot back. "You just admitted your father's business was illegal. So whose property is it really? Yours? The government's? Maybe it belongs to whoever's brave enough to claim it." They stared at each other across the cabin, the tension thick enough to cut. Gabriel realized his hand was shaking on the pipe wrench. He also realized that Elias wasn't alone. Through the porthole, he could see movement on the dock. Two figures standing near his truck, backlit by the marina floodlights. They were watching, waiting. "You brought backup," Gabriel said quietly. Elias glanced out the window. "Insurance. In case you decided to be difficult. But I prefer to settle this peacefully." $10,000, Gabriel. That's 4 times what you paid for the ship. Take it and walk away. And if I don't? Then my associates and I take the silver anyway, and you get nothing. Plus, you'll have the added pleasure of explaining to the police how you failed to report finding millions in stolen property. That's a crime, by the way, even if you didn't know it was stolen. The law requires you to report found valuables above a certain amount. You could lose custody of your daughter over something like this. Gabriel felt the blood drain from his face. Lose hope? That was a threat that cut deeper than any violence could. He thought of his daughter at home, probably doing her homework, probably humming a church hymn the way she always did when she was concentrating. Hope, who trusted her daddy to protect her, to keep her safe. "I need time to think," Gabriel said. "You have until tomorrow night," Elias replied. 9 p.m. "I'll meet you here with the cash. You hand over the silver. I hand over the money. And we both go our separate ways. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody goes to prison." He walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Don't do anything stupid, Gabriel. Don't try to move the silver. Don't call the police. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. My people are watching. They'll be watching until this is done." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing on the metal gangway. Gabriel rushed to the window and watched him join the 2 figures near his truck. They talked briefly. Then all 3 walked away into the darkness. He was alone again, but he'd never felt less safe. Gabriel locked the cabin door and sat down, his legs too weak to hold him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from the babysitter. "Hope is asking when you'll be home." "Everything okay?" Gabriel's hands trembled as he typed back, "On my way." 20 minutes. He couldn't stay here. He needed to get to Hope. Needed to make sure his daughter was safe. Gabriel grabbed his toolbox and fled the ship, practically running down the dock to his truck. Every shadow made him jump. Every sound made his heart race. He drove home 5 miles over the speed limit, checking his rearview mirror constantly, convinced he was being followed. The apartment complex had never looked so welcoming. Gabriel paid the babysitter, double-checked all the locks, then went to Hope's room. Her daughter was in bed, reading a book about dolphins. "Daddy, you're home." Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed and hugged Hope tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling the warmth of her small body. "Hey, baby. Sorry I'm late." "It's okay. Sarah let me stay up an extra half hour." Hope pulled back and looked at her father's face. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Gabriel hadn't realized he was. He wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. "Just tired, sweetie. It's been a long day." "Is the ship almost fixed?" "Almost," Gabriel lied. "Just a few more things to do." He tucked Hope in, turned out the light, and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall with each breath. That steady rhythm, that proof of life, was the only thing that mattered. Everything else, the silver, the ship, Elias's threats, was secondary to keeping Hope safe. Gabriel went to the living room and paced the worn carpet. He had less than 24 hours to decide. $10,000 wouldn't even cover a quarter of Hope's medical expenses. But fighting Elias meant risking everything. He'd been right about the legal implications. Gabriel should have reported the silver immediately. By keeping quiet, even for a day, he'd made himself vulnerable. He thought about calling Elijah, but what could the old man do? Gabriel had already ignored his advice to report the silver. He thought about calling a lawyer, but he couldn't afford one, and explaining the situation would just dig him deeper into trouble. He was trapped, caught between his desperate need and the dangerous reality he'd stumbled into. At 3 o'clock in the morning, unable to sleep, Gabriel opened his laptop and started researching. He searched for Elias's last name, but Elias hadn't mentioned it. He searched for precious metals businesses in the Midwest that had closed in 2005. Dozens of results came up. He searched for Arthur Vance more thoroughly, going beyond the obituary. That's when he found it. A scanned newspaper article from 2007 buried in the archives of a Chicago newspaper. Local refinery owner questioned in silver laundering operation. The article was brief, but it mentioned Arthur Vance as a person of interest in a federal investigation into illegal precious metals trafficking. The investigation had apparently gone nowhere, charges were never filed, but it confirmed Elias's story, at least partially. Gabriel kept digging. He found more articles, more pieces of the puzzle. In the early 2000s, there had been a surge in illegal silver trading. Industrial silver stolen from factories, melted down, and resold. The operations had been shut down by federal authorities. But a lot of silver had never been recovered. Was that what was hidden on his ship? Stolen industrial silver? Silver connected to organized theft rings? The thought made Gabriel's stomach turn. He'd been so focused on the money, on what it could do for Hope, that he hadn't fully considered the danger. If Elias was telling the truth, if this silver really was connected to organized crime, then he was in far deeper trouble than he'd imagined. The next morning, Gabriel dropped Hope at school and called in sick to work again. His boss wasn't happy. "Gabe, you've missed 3 days this month. I need reliable people." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll be back tomorrow. I promise." He hung up before the man could argue. Tomorrow didn't matter if he didn't survive today. Gabriel drove to the marina, but he didn't go to his ship. Instead, he parked across the street at a bait shop and watched. He sat there for 2 hours, drinking lukewarm coffee, watching Doc see through a pair of binoculars he'd kept in his glove box for birdwatching with Hope. At 10:30, a black SUV pulled into the marina parking lot. 2 men got out, the same 2 who'd been with Elias the night before. They walked down Dock C, stopping at slip 33. They didn't board the ship, just stood there watching it, arms crossed. Guards. Elias was making sure he didn't move the silver. Gabriel's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? Good morning, Gabriel." Elias's voice was pleasant, conversational. "I hope you slept well. How did you get this number? Please." In the age of the internet, phone numbers are hardly private. "I'm calling to confirm our meeting tonight. 9 p.m. Don't be late. What if I don't show up? Then my associates will retrieve the silver themselves. And you'll have an unfortunate accident. Ship fires are surprisingly common. Old wiring, fuel leaks, tragedies happen every day. The authorities would probably blame it on faulty electrical work. Such a shame, really, especially for a single father with a sick child." Gabriel's blood ran cold. "You're threatening to kill me." "I'm threatening nothing. I'm simply explaining consequences. You have something that belongs to me. I want it back. This can end peacefully, or it can end badly. The choice is yours." He hung up. Gabriel sat in his truck, hands shaking so badly he spilled lukewarm coffee onto his jeans. This was real. These people were serious. They would hurt him, maybe kill him, to get what they wanted. And the worst part was, he had no proof of any of it. No recording of Elias's threats, no evidence except his word against his. He thought about going to the police, walking into the station, and confessing everything. But what would he say? "I found $150 million in silver and didn't report it. And now criminals want to take it from me." They'd arrest him on the spot. He'd lose Hope while he fought the charges. Hope would go into foster care. She might not get the surgery she needed. She might die while Gabriel sat in a jail cell. No. Going to the police wasn't an option. Running wasn't an option either. Elias's people were watching. If he tried to flee, they'd follow. If he tried to move the silver, they'd stop him. He was cornered with no good moves left. Gabriel drove aimlessly for an hour, his mind spinning through possibilities. Finally, he found himself pulling into the parking lot of the St. Peter's Public Library. He needed information. He needed to understand who he was dealing with, what he was really up against. Inside, he found an empty computer terminal and continued his research. He searched for silver smuggling operations in the Midwest, for criminal organizations involved in precious metals. He found references to syndicates, to money laundering schemes, to violence and murder. Every article made him more afraid. Then he found something interesting. A name that appeared in multiple articles about precious metals trafficking in the early 2000s, Viktor Sokolov, described as a mid-level operator in a larger trafficking network. He'd been arrested in 2006 but released due to insufficient evidence. His last known associates included a business partner named Arthur Vance. Gabriel searched for Viktor Sokolov and Arthur Vance together. It was buried deep in a forum thread about unsolved crimes, a user speculating that Vance hadn't just disappeared with family money, he'd skimmed from the Russian syndicate he was laundering for. If that was true, if this silver had originally been syndicate silver, then Elias wasn't the only person looking for it. There might be others, far more dangerous than a bitter half-brother, who wanted it back. Gabriel felt sick. He'd thought he was fighting one man and his associates, but he might be caught in something much bigger, much deadlier. He needed help. Real help. Not Elijah, who was out of his depth. Not the police, who would arrest him. He needed someone who understood this world, who could navigate the gray areas, who could protect him. Gabriel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. There was one person. Maybe. Sam Winters, a private investigator he'd met years ago at the shipyard. Sam had been investigating insurance fraud involving a sunken barge, and Gabriel had helped him understand the mechanical sabotage that caused it. They'd stayed in touch, exchanged Christmas texts, the kind of loose connection you forget about until you desperately need it. He found the number and called. It rang 4 times before he answered. Sam Winters. Sam, it's Gabriel. We met about 7 years ago at the shipyard. You were investigating the... Gabriel, of course. The mechanic. I remember. What can I do for you? I need help. I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. And I don't know who else to call. There was a pause. What kind of trouble? Gabriel took a deep breath. The kind that might get me killed. Can we meet? Somewhere public. There's a coffee shop on Central Avenue. The Daily Grind. Meet me there in 30 minutes. Gabriel drove to the coffee shop, checking his mirrors constantly. He didn't see the black SUV, but that didn't mean they weren't watching. Gabriel parked 2 blocks away and walked, keeping to crowded sidewalks, staying in public view. Sam was already there, sitting in a back corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. He was in his early 50s, his grey hair cut military short, wearing jeans and a faded polo shirt. He stood when Gabriel approached and shook his hand firmly. You look scared, Gabe. I am, Gabriel admitted. He sat down, ordered a black coffee he didn't want, and then told him everything. The ship, the silver, the hidden compartment, Elias's visit, his threats, the research he'd done. Sam listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When Gabriel finished, Sam sat back and exhaled slowly. You've stepped in it deep, my friend. I know. Can you help me? Maybe. But I need to be honest with you. If this silver is connected to organized crime, to the syndicate, then we're talking about people who don't hesitate to kill. They've done it before. They'll do it again. So what do I do? Give Elias the silver and hope he goes away. Sam shook his head. Guys like Elias don't just go away. If you give him the silver, you become a witness. Someone who knows too much. That makes you a liability. So I'm dead either way. Not necessarily. We need to flip the script. We need to make you more valuable alive than dead. Sam pulled out a small notebook and started writing. First, we document everything. Every threat, every interaction, we get proof. Then we go to the FBI. The FBI? I'll be arrested for not reporting the silver. Maybe. But you'll also be protected. The FBI doesn't care about you keeping quiet for a few days. They care about recovering stolen property and taking down criminal organizations. You become their witness, their informant, and suddenly you have the full weight of federal law enforcement protecting you. Gabriel's head was spinning. What about Hope? What happens to her if I'm arrested? We make that part of the deal. You cooperate, they grant you immunity, and Hope stays with you throughout the process. I know people at the Bureau. I can make calls. But Gabriel, we need to move fast. If Elias's meeting is tonight at 9 o'clock, we have less than 12 hours. Gabriel looked out the coffee shop window at the people walking by, living their normal lives, unaware of the danger he was drowning in. He thought about Hope at school right now, probably in math class, probably raising her hand to answer questions. Hope, who loved dolphins and drawing and believed her daddy could fix anything. Okay, Gabriel said. Let's do it. Sam made a call right there in the coffee shop. He spoke in low tones using phrases Gabriel didn't understand. When he hung up, he looked relieved. I reached out to an agent I trust. She's willing to meet with you this afternoon. But Gabriel, once you walk into that meeting, there's no going back. You're committed. You tell them everything. You hand over the silver, and you hope the system works in your favor. What about tonight? Elias is expecting me at 9 o'clock. We'll set up surveillance. You wear a wire. You meet him like planned, but this time the FBI records everything. His threats, his confession about the silver's origin, all of it. Then they move in and arrest him. It sounded simple. It sounded safe. But Gabriel had learned that nothing was ever as simple as it sounded. What if something goes wrong? What if Elias suspects something? That's why I'll be there, Sam said. Not visible, but close. If things go sideways, I'll intervene. But Gabriel, you need to trust me. And you need to trust that the system will protect you. Trust. That was asking a lot from a black man who'd spent his entire life being let down by systems, by people, by promises. But what choice did he have? He was out of options, out of time, out of luck. All right, Gabriel said. Let's meet with the FBI. They left the coffee shop separately. Sam gave Gabriel an address downtown, a federal building where the FBI had offices. He drove there slowly, giving himself time to think, to second guess, to panic. But he didn't turn around. He parked in the visitor lot and walked into the sterile federal building, showing ID at the security desk and taking the elevator to the 4th floor. Sam was waiting for him outside a conference room. Ready? Gabriel nodded, even though he wasn't. They entered together. Inside, a woman in her 40s sat at a long table, her dark hair pulled back, her expression professional but not unkind. Mr. Vance, excuse me, Mr. King. I'm Special Agent Sarah Jenkins. Please sit down. Gabriel Saturday. Sam sat beside him. Agent Jenkins opened a folder and pulled out a legal pad. Sam has briefed me on your situation. I want to hear it directly from you. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. So Gabriel told the story again. The ship purchase, the engine rebuild, finding the hidden compartment, the silver bars, Elias's visit, his threats. Agent Jenkins took notes, asked clarifying questions, but mostly just listened. When Gabriel finished, the agent set down her pen and looked directly at him. Mr. King, you've committed several federal crimes, failure to report found property, possible possession of stolen goods, tax evasion. Under normal circumstances, you'd be looking at serious charges. Gabriel's heart sank. But these aren't normal circumstances. The silver you found is almost certainly connected to a larger criminal enterprise we've been investigating for years. If you're willing to cooperate fully, if you're willing to testify, if you're willing to help us build a case, then we can offer you immunity. What about my daughter? Agent Jenkins' expression softened slightly. Your daughter stays with you. We'll make sure of that. But understand, cooperation means full cooperation. You hand over the silver. You wear a wire tonight. You help us identify and arrest everyone involved. You testify in court if necessary. Can you do that? Gabriel thought of hope. Of the surgery. Of the life he'd hoped the silver would provide. All of that was gone now, evaporating like morning mist. But hope would be safe. Gabriel would be alive. Maybe that was enough. Yes, Gabriel said. I can do that. Agent Jenkins smiled for the first time. Good. Then let's get to work. We have a lot to do before 9 o'clock tonight. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of paperwork, briefings, and technical preparations. Agent Jenkins assembled a small team, 3 other agents, all of them moving with practiced efficiency. They transformed the conference room into a command center, spreading out maps of the marina, photographs of Gabriel's ship, and surveillance equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Gabriel sat at the table signing document after document, immunity agreement, witness protection protocols, evidence transfer forms, his hand cramping from writing his signature so many times. Sam sat beside him throughout it all, occasionally explaining legal terms, making sure he understood what he was agreeing to. Mr. King, Agent Jenkins said, spreading out a blueprint of the marina on the table. Walk me through the layout. Where's your ship? Where are the exits? Where would Elias's people be positioned? Gabriel leaned over the blueprint, pointing with a calloused finger. My ship is here. Slip 33. End of Dock C. There's only one way on and off the dock, this main walkway. The parking lot is here. There's a security camera at the entrance, but I don't think it works. The marina office closes at 6 o'clock, so there won't be anyone official around at 9 o'clock. What about other boat owners? Anyone typically on their vessels at that hour? The weekenders usually leave by Sunday evening. Weeknights are quieter, but there are a few liveaboards, people who actually sleep on their boats. They might be around. Agent Jenkins made notes. We'll position agents on nearby boats, undercover, dressed like regular boaters. You'll wear a wire, a small microphone and transmitter hidden under your clothes. All you need to do is get Elias talking. Get him to admit where the silver came from, who it belongs to, why he's threatening you. The sting. Once we have the admission, Agent Jenkins continued, use the signal phrase. Ask him, is this really the only way? That's our cue to move in. Gabriel nodded, repeating the phrase in his head. Is this really the only way? One more thing, Jenkins added. We can't promise you'll get a reward. But if this silver is seized as proceeds of crime, there are administrative avenues for compensation. It won't be $150 million. But it might be enough for the surgery. Gabriel looked up, hope sparking in his chest for the first time that day. That's all I need. At 8:30 p.m., Gabriel was back in his truck, parked in his usual spot at the marina. The wire was taped to his chest, the battery pack warm against his skin. Sam was in a van down the street with the backup team. Agent Jenkins was listening in real time. Gabriel walked down Dock C. The air was heavy and humid. The water was black and still. The Lazarus loomed at the end of the slip, a dark giant against the stars. He stepped aboard. The deck creaked. He unlocked the cabin and waited. At 8:58, he saw headlights sweep across the parking lot. 2 doors slammed. Footsteps approached on the dock, heavy, confident. Elias walked into the cabin. He was alone this time, but Gabriel knew his men were close. "You're here," Elias said, looking around. "And alone. Smart man." "I didn't have much choice," Gabriel said, his voice steady thanks to the adrenaline. "You said you'd kill me." "I said accidents happen," Elias corrected smoothly. "Do you have the silver?" "It's in the boiler room. Just like I found it." "Good." Elias pulled a thick envelope from his jacket. "Here. $10,000. Consider it a consultation fee." Gabriel didn't take it. "Before I give it to you, I need to know, who am I really giving this to? Is it your family? Or the syndicate?" Elias paused. He smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Does it matter?" "The syndicate, my father's business, it's all the same money, Gabriel. It's all blood and iron. Arthur tried to steal it from the organization, and he paid for it. Now, stop stalling." "I just don't want any trouble," Gabriel said, stepping back. "Is this really the only way?" "Yes," Elias said, pulling a small pistol from his waistband. "It is." "FBI. Drop the weapon." The cabin exploded with noise and light. Agents swarmed from the dock and the neighboring boats. Elias spun around, but he was already surrounded. He dropped the gun, his face twisting in shock and rage as he was slammed against the bulkhead and cuffed. Gabriel stood in the corner, shaking, watching the chaos unfold. Sam appeared in the doorway, giving him a thumbs up. It was over. 6 months later. The waiting room at Children's Hospital was bright and painted with cartoon animals. Gabriel sat in a plastic chair, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. Dr. Aries walked out, pulling off his surgical mask. He smiled. "Mr. King." Gabriel stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "Yes? How is she?" "The surgery was a complete success," the doctor said. "Hope is going to be just fine. Her heart is strong." Gabriel let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for half a year. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. The silver was gone, seized by the government as evidence in a massive RICO case against the Midwestern Syndicate. But Agent Jenkins had kept her word. A finder's fee had been processed, expedited through channels Gabriel didn't understand. It wasn't millions. But it was $85,000. Enough for the surgery. Enough to pay off his debts. Enough to fix up the Lazarus, for real this time. Gabriel walked to the recovery room window. Hope was sleeping, hooked up to monitors, but her color was good. She looked peaceful. He pulled out his phone and looked at a picture of the old cruise ship. He had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't just fixing broken things. He was building a future. "We floated, baby girl," he whispered to the glass. "We floated. Once we have that on tape, we move in. What if he searches me for a wire? This equipment is state-of-the-art. It's designed to be undetectable. But if he does search you, if he suspects anything, you use the panic word. Say the phrase, 'I need fresh air.' That's our signal to move in immediately, even if we don't have everything we need." Gabriel nodded, his mouth dry. This was really happening. He was going to be wired up like some kind of undercover operative sent to meet with criminals, all while federal agents watched from the shadows. It felt surreal, like something from a movie, not his actual life. At 4:30 p.m., a female agent named Chen came in carrying a small hardshell case. "Mr. King, I'm going to fit you with the recording equipment. It'll just take a few minutes." Gabriel followed her to a private room. Agent Chen opened the case to reveal devices smaller than Gabriel had imagined, a microphone no bigger than a shirt button, a transmitter the size of a credit card, and thin wires that would run under his clothing. "This might feel awkward at first," Agent Chen said. "But you'll get used to it. Just try to forget it's there." Easy for her to say. Gabriel stood still as Chen carefully attached the microphone to the inside of his work shirt, positioned the transmitter against his lower back, and secured everything with medical tape. "Test, test," Chen said into her own radio. "Read you 5 by 5, another agent confirmed through her earpiece. "All set," Chen said to Gabriel. "Just remember, don't touch the equipment. Don't adjust it. If it feels loose or uncomfortable, live with it. The moment you start fiddling with your clothes, you'll make Elias suspicious." Gabriel looked at himself in the mirror. He looked normal. Just a tired mechanic in jeans and a flannel shirt. You couldn't see any of the equipment. "What about my phone?" he asked. "Leave it behind. We'll give you a clean phone with no personal information on it. If Elias checks it, he'll see an empty contact list. No photos, nothing that matters." Back in the conference room, Agent Jenkins was briefing her team. "Listen up. Our primary objective is to get evidence linking this silver to the Sokolov organization. We've been after them for 15 years, and this might be our best opportunity. The silver Mr. King found matches the description of industrial bullion that went missing in 2005 during a raid on a laundering operation in Chicago. If we can prove Elias Vance is connected to that theft, we can use it as leverage to flip him, get him to testify against higher-ups in the organization." Gabriel felt his stomach drop. "Wait, you're saying this silver is definitely from a syndicate?" Jenkins turned to him. "Almost certainly. The Sokolov organization specialized in stealing and resmelting precious metals from factories across the Midwest, using them to launder drug money. When we raided their Chicago refinery in 2005, we recovered about 40% of their stock. The rest disappeared. We've always suspected insiders stole it," Sam added. "People within the organization who saw an opportunity. Arthur Vance was a peripheral player, someone who handled logistics and transport. Our theory is that he took the silver during the chaos of the investigation and hid it, planning to wait until things cooled down. But he died before he could retrieve it." "Exactly," Jenkins said. "And now his half-brother wants it back. But here's the interesting part." Jenkins pulled out a photograph, an old mugshot of a stern-faced man in his 50s. "Recognize him?" Gabriel shook his head. "That's Viktor Sokolov. He's been in federal prison since 2009 on unrelated charges, but he still runs operations from inside. If he finds out his silver has been located, he'll send people to retrieve it. People much more dangerous than Elias Vance." Gabriel's blood ran cold. "So, I'm not just dealing with Elias. I'm dealing with the Russian mob. Potentially. Which is why we need to move fast. We grab Elias tonight, get him talking, and use what he tells us to build a case before Sokolov's people get involved." The weight of the situation pressed down on Gabriel like a physical force. He'd thought finding the silver was his salvation. Instead, it had placed him and Hope directly in the crosshairs of one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the country. "What about my daughter?" Gabriel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Gabriel's voice cracked. "If these people find out about her—" "We've already dispatched agents to watch your apartment," Jenkins said firmly. "Hope is safe. I promise you that. After tonight, we'll move both of you to a secure location until this is resolved." Gabriel wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust that the FBI could protect them, but trust was hard when your whole world had been turned upside down in a matter of weeks. At 6 p.m., Jenkins called for a break. "Mr. King, you should eat something. It's going to be a long night." Gabriel wasn't hungry, but he forced down a sandwich someone brought. Sam sat with him, not saying much, just being present. "You're doing the right thing," Sam finally said. "I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are." "I just wanted to help my daughter," Gabriel whispered. "I wasn't trying to get involved with the syndicate and federal investigations. I just wanted to fix a ship and make enough money to pay for surgery." "I know. And we're going to make sure that happens. Once this is over, once you've testified and helped the Bureau, there are programs, victim compensation funds, whistleblower rewards. You won't walk away empty-handed. Gabriel laughed bitterly. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want Hope safe. At 7:30, the team started preparing to move out. 3 agents would be positioned on boats near Gabriel's slip. 2 more would be in a surveillance van in the parking lot. Jenkins herself would be on a small fishing trawler 2 slips over, close enough to intervene if necessary. Sam would stay at the command center monitoring everything remotely. Remember, Jenkins said, checking Gabriel's wire one last time. We need Elias to incriminate himself. Ask him questions. Where did the silver come from? How long has he been looking for it? Who else knows about it? The more he talks, the more we have. Gabriel nodded. His hands were shaking again. Jenkins noticed. You're going to be fine. We do this all the time. Just stay calm, act natural, and trust that we've got your back. At 8:15, Gabriel drove to the marina alone, followed at a distance by an unmarked FBI vehicle. The sun had set, and the parking lot was dimly lit by flickering street lamps. Gabriel parked in his usual spot, grabbed the empty toolbox he'd brought as a prop, and walked toward Dock C. His heavy boots echoed on the wooden planks. The boats around him were dark and silent. He could hear water lapping against hulls, the distant sound of traffic on the highway, and his own heartbeat pounding in his ears like a drum. When he reached slip 33, he set down the toolbox and waited on the deck of the Lazarus. 9 o'clock came and went. No Elias. Gabriel stood on the corroded steel deck, trying to look relaxed, trying not to touch the wire hidden under his flannel shirt. 9:15, 9:30. Where was he? Then he heard footsteps. Multiple footsteps. Gabriel turned to see not just Elias, but 4 men walking down the dock toward him. Elias was in front, wearing the same windbreaker as before. Behind him were 3 others. All of them big. All of them moving with the casual confidence of people who knew how to hurt others. Gabriel's pulse spiked. This wasn't the plan. Elias was supposed to come alone or with 1 associate. For men meant he was serious. It meant he was prepared for trouble. He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the wire underneath, hoping the FBI was hearing this, hoping they were ready. Gabriel, Elias said, stepping onto the gangway without invitation. I hope you've made the right decision. I'm here, aren't I? Gabriel said, trying to keep his voice deep and steady. You are. But you're also sweating. You're late, Gabriel said. It's past 9:30. I've been here since 8:45. You're the one who's watching the clock, Elias smiled. Had to make sure you weren't planning anything stupid. My associates did a sweep of the area. We're alone. No police, no witnesses. Just us and a lot of silver. Gabriel's heart sank. If Elias's people had swept the area, had they spotted the FBI agents? Were Jenkins and her team blown? He resisted the urge to look toward the fishing trawler where Jenkins was supposed to be hiding. So, Elias continued, gesturing to his associates. Show us where it is. Gabriel hesitated. The final confrontation. Before I do, Gabriel said, planting his feet. I need to know something. For my own peace of mind. Elias sighed, checking his watch. Make it quick. You said this silver came from your father's business. But I did some reading. Your father was connected to Viktor Sokolov. Is this syndicate silver? Because if I hand this over, am I going to have the Russian mob coming after me later? Elias laughed, a dry, barking sound. You have been busy. Yes, Gabriel. It's Sokolov silver. Stolen from factories in Chicago, melted down in my father's foundry. Arthur got greedy. He thought he could steal from the thief. But don't worry about the Russians. Once I have the silver, you disappear from the story. You never saw it. You never saw me. And the $10,000? I have it right here. Elias patted his pocket. Now. The boiler room. Okay, Gabriel said. It's down there. He led them into the main cabin. The three muscle men crowded the space, making it feel suffocatingly small. Gabriel pointed to the hatch. After you, Elias said. Gabriel climbed down the ladder. Elias followed. The three men stayed above, guarding the exit. In the boiler room, Gabriel pointed to the steel panel held up by duct tape. It's behind there. Elias stepped forward, ripping the tape away. He pulled the panel down with a clang. The beam of his flashlight hit the silver bars, and his eyes went wide with greed. Beautiful, Elias whispered. Absolutely beautiful. He reached out, stroking a bar like it was a lover. Arthur, you clever son of a bitch. So that's it then? Gabriel asked, his voice shaking. You got what you came for. Now give me the money and leave. Elias turned slowly. The flashlight beam hit Gabriel's face, blinding him. You know, Elias said softly. My father always taught me to tie up loose ends. You seem like a nice man, Gabriel. A good father. But you know too much. You know about Sokolov. You know about the theft. Elias reached into his jacket. But he didn't pull out an envelope of cash. He pulled out a gun with a silencer attached. I can't leave a witness. Gabriel's blood froze. The wire. He had to use the signal. Wait! Gabriel shouted, backing up until he hit the cold engine block. Please? Is this really the only way? I need fresh air. Fresh air won't help you now, Elias sneered, raising the gun. Crash. The skylight above the boiler room shattered inward. A stun grenade dropped onto the metal grating between them. Bang! A blinding flash of light and a deafening boom filled the small space. Gabriel covered his ears and dropped to the floor as instructed. FBI. Don't move. Federal agents. Drop the weapon. Boots thundered on the deck above. There was the sound of a scuffle, shouting, bodies hitting the floor. Then agents were pouring down the ladder, weapons drawn, lasers cutting through the smoke. Elias was on his knees, rubbing his eyes, the gun lying uselessly a few feet away. Two agents were on him in seconds, zip-tying his hands behind his back. Elias Vance, you are under arrest. Agent Jenkins appeared at the bottom of the ladder, wearing a tactical vest. She spotted Gabriel huddled by the engine. Mr. King. Are you okay? Gabriel looked up, his ears ringing, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at Elias, defeated and cuffed. He looked at the wall of silver bars that had almost cost him his life. Yeah, Gabriel breathed, pulling the tape and wire off his chest. I'm okay. I'm ready to go home. Epilogue. The waiting room at Children's Hospital was bright and painted with cartoon animals. Gabriel sat in a plastic chair, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. Dr. Aries walked out, pulling off his surgical mask. He smiled. Mr. King. Gabriel stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Yes? How is she? The surgery was a complete success, the doctor said. Hope is going to be just fine. Her heart is strong. Gabriel let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 6 months. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. The silver was gone, seized by the government as evidence in a massive RICO case against the remnants of the Sokolov syndicate. Elias Vance was looking at 20 years in federal prison. But Agent Jenkins had kept her word. A finder's fee had been processed, expedited through channels Gabriel didn't understand. It wasn't millions. But it was $85,000. Enough for the surgery. Enough to pay off his debts. Enough to fix up the Lazarus, for real this time. Gabriel walked to the recovery room window. Hope was sleeping, hooked up to monitors, but her color was good. She looked peaceful. He pulled out his phone and looked at a picture of the old cruise ship. He had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't just fixing broken things. He was building a future. "We floated, baby girl," he whispered to the glass. "We floated." The plan had been to get Elias talking first, to gather evidence before revealing the silver's location. But with 4 men surrounding him, with the situation already off script, Gabriel didn't have much choice. "Boiler room," he said. "There's a hidden compartment behind the starboard bulkhead." 2 of Elias's men climbed down through the hatch while Elias and the 3rd man stayed on deck with Gabriel. He could hear them moving around below, the sound of duct tape being ripped away, the steel panel being pried off, then a low whistle. "Boss, it's here." All of it. Elias's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe. Or greed. "Start bringing it up. Load it into the cases." The men worked efficiently, passing silver bars up from the boiler room and packing them into heavy-duty aluminum cases they'd brought with them. Gabriel watched, each bar representing a hope destroyed, a future lost. But he forced himself to focus. He needed to get Elias talking. Needed to give the Fed something they could use. "Can I ask you something?" Gabriel said. Elias glanced at him. "What?" "This silver. It's not really from your father's business, is it?" Elias laughed softly. "Does it matter?" "I'm curious," Gabriel said. "I looked into Arthur's history. I found articles about metals laundering operations in the 2000s. Was Arthur involved with the Sokolov organization?" Elias's expression hardened. "You've been busy. Too busy for your own good. I just want to understand what I found. What this is really about." "Fine. You want the truth." Elias moved closer, his voice dropping. "Yes, Arthur was part of Sokolov's network. He moved silver from factories to the refinery, then out to buyers. Small-time stuff. But during the federal raid in 2005, he saw an opportunity. He loaded up this ship with bullion that belonged to Viktor Sokolov and disappeared. Viktor spent years looking for him. But Arthur went underground, changed his routines, lived on this rust bucket like a ghost. By the time Sokolov's people tracked him down in 2017, Arthur dropped dead of a heart attack before they could make him talk. Gabriel felt the wire pressing against his skin. This was it. This was the confession Agent Jenkins needed. "So the silver belongs to Viktor Sokolov," Gabriel said. "Technically, yes. But Viktor's in prison and his organization is fractured. I figured if I could find the silver, I could negotiate, use it as leverage to buy my way into what's left of the operation. That's worth more than the metal itself. Power. Connections. Protection. And what about me?" Gabriel asked quietly. "What happens to me after you take the silver?" Elias's smile was cold. "You were never supposed to find it. You were supposed to give up on this ship like everyone else. But you didn't. You kept digging, kept working, and now you know too much. So I'm afraid your story ends here, Gabriel. Tonight. On this deck." He pulled a gun from inside his windbreaker, a compact pistol that glinted in the marina lights. "I'm sorry. You seem like a decent man. But business is business." "I need fresh air," Gabriel said, the panicked phrase, his voice rising with real fear now. Elias frowned. "What?" "I need fresh air. I can't breathe. I need." Suddenly, the night exploded with light and sound. Floodlights blasted on from nearby boats, pinning Elias and his men in harsh white glare. Voices shouted through amplified speakers. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons! Hands where we can see them!" Elias spun, raising his gun, but he never got a shot off. Agents in tactical gear swarmed the ship from 3 directions, moving with practiced precision. Elias went down under 2 agents, his gun skittering across the deck. His associates tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Within seconds, all 4 men were on the steel, wrists zip-tied behind their backs. Agent Jenkins appeared beside Gabriel, her own weapon drawn. "Mr. King, you okay?" Gabriel couldn't speak. He nodded, his whole body shaking with adrenaline. It was over. It was actually over. He'd survived. The next hours were a chaos of activity. More federal agents arrived, along with evidence technicians who photographed everything, documented the silver, and interviewed Gabriel over and over again about every moment that had led to this night. Elias and his men were hauled away in separate vehicles, shouting threats and profanities that echoed across the dark marina. Gabriel sat in the back of an FBI van, wrapped in a blanket someone had given him, watching it all like a movie he wasn't quite part of. Sam appeared beside him at some point, handing him a cup of coffee. "You did good, Gabe. Really good. I almost got killed. But you didn't," Sam said. "You stayed calm. You got the confession. And now these guys are going away for a long time." Agent Jenkins came over, her phone pressed to her ear, nodding at whatever was being said. When she hung up, she looked at Gabriel with something like respect. "That was excellent work," she said. Elias talked on the recording. He confessed to multiple federal crimes, connected himself to the Sokolov organization, and incriminated at least 6 other individuals we've been investigating. "This is huge. Mr. King, you've helped us more than you know. What happens now?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse. "Now we process the evidence, build our case, and prepare for trial. You'll need to testify, probably in about 6 months. Until then, we'll keep you and Hope under protection. We have a safe house ready." Gabriel's eyes widened. "I can't just disappear. Hope has school, doctor's appointments. I have a job. We have a life here." "Mr. King, Victor Sokolov is still out there," Jenkins said gravely. "When he learns his silver has been seized, when he finds out Elias was arrested and talked, he'll send people to clean up loose ends. That includes you. The safest thing is to relocate temporarily." "For how long?" Jenkins hesitated. "Could be 6 months. Could be longer. Depends on how fast the case moves." Gabriel felt his life crumbling again, rebuilt from rubble only to collapse once more. "I can't. My daughter is sick. She needs stability. Routine. Uprooting her life will make everything worse." "Then we'll make accommodations," Jenkins said. "Keep you in the area but under surveillance. Change your address, give you new identities for daily use. It's not ideal, but it's possible." Sam squeezed Gabriel's shoulder. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." At 2 o'clock in the morning, an agent finally drove Gabriel home. 2 other agents were already stationed outside his apartment building in an unmarked car, watching, protecting. Gabriel climbed the stairs on exhausted legs and opened the door to find Hope asleep on the couch, the television murmuring quietly. The teenage babysitter was dozing in the chair. Gabriel paid her, sent her home, then carried Hope to bed without waking her. He stood in the doorway of their tiny bedroom, watching his daughter sleep, and felt the full weight of everything crash down on him. He'd lost the silver. He'd lost the ship, which was now evidence in a federal case. He'd lost his chance to pay for Hope's surgery. All he'd gained was danger, threats, and the terrifying knowledge that powerful people wanted them dead. Gabriel slid down to the floor, his broad back against the wall, and finally let himself cry, silent, racking sobs that shook his whole body. He'd tried so hard. He'd worked so hard, and he had failed. But then Hope stirred, rolling over in her bed, her eyes opening slightly. "Daddy!" Gabriel wiped his face quickly on his sleeve. "I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep." "Are you sad?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "A little," he whispered. "But I'm okay." Hope sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Did the ship break again?" Gabriel almost laughed, a broken, watery sound. "Yeah. Something like that. Hope climbed out of bed and wrapped her small arms around her father's thick neck. "It's okay, Daddy. You can fix it. You can fix anything." Gabriel held his daughter tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of her heart against his own. And in that moment, sitting on the floor of their cramped apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning, Gabriel realized something. Hope was right. Maybe not about fixing the ship, but about something more important. He had spent weeks obsessed with money, with silver, with finding a magical solution to their problems. But the real solution had been with him all along. His strength. His faith. His refusal to give up. The treasure wasn't the silver hidden in the ship, it was the little girl with the fierce heart, sleeping safely in his arms. The gold was gone, but she was still here. Hope was still here. They were alive. They were together. And that meant they still had a chance. The next morning, Agent Jenkins called with unexpected news. "Mr. King, I wanted to update you on the case. Based on Elias Vance's confession and the silver we recovered, the federal prosecutor is moving forward with charges against multiple individuals in the Sokolov organization. This is the biggest breakthrough we've had in years." "That's good," Gabriel said, though he felt no joy. "What about the silver?" "It's been seized as evidence. However, there's something you should know. The U.S. government has a program for compensating witnesses who provide substantial assistance in federal cases. Given the value of the evidence you provided and the risks you've taken, the prosecutor is recommending you receive a reward." Gabriel's heart skipped a beat. "A reward? How much?" "The details are still being worked out, but typically it's a percentage of the recovered assets. In this case, with $150 million in silver, you could be looking at anywhere from $7.5 million to $15 million. Gabriel sat down hard on his worn-out sofa. "What?" "It's not guaranteed," Jenkins cautioned. "You'll need to testify successfully. The defendants will likely challenge the reward. It could take years to resolve. But Mr. King, if everything goes as planned, you're going to be a wealthy man." When he hung up, Gabriel just sat there, staring at the wall. $10 million. Maybe more. More money than he'd ever imagined having. Enough to pay for Hope's surgery 100 times over. Enough to buy a real house. To send Hope to college. To never worry about money again. It felt like a dream, an impossible, beautiful dream. Over the next few weeks, Gabriel's life transformed in ways he couldn't have predicted. The FBI moved him and Hope to a small rental house in a better neighborhood, paid for by the witness protection budget. Hope started at a new school where the teachers were kind and the building didn't have bars on the windows. Gabriel found work as a lead mechanic for the city's fleet of heavy vehicles, where his skills were valued and his paycheck was steady. The story of that silver ship, as the media called it, spread like wildfire. Gabriel declined interview requests, but that didn't stop reporters from digging into his background, painting him as either a hero or a criminal, depending on which outlet was reporting. Some called him brave for cooperating with the FBI. Others questioned why he hadn't reported the silver immediately. Gabriel ignored it all. He focused on Hope, on work, on building a life that felt stable, even if it was temporary. 6 months later, he sat in a federal courtroom, dressed in his only suit, and testified against Elias Vance and 3 other defendants connected to the Sokolov organization. The defense attorneys were brutal, questioning his motives, suggesting he'd been trying to steal the silver himself. But Gabriel told the truth calmly, clearly, and when he was done, even the judge looked impressed. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Elias Vance was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The others received similar sentences. As they were led away, Elias looked at Gabriel one last time with pure hatred in his eyes, but Gabriel didn't flinch. He'd stopped being afraid of men like Elias months ago. 3 months after the trial, the federal prosecutor called Gabriel into her office. "Mr. King, I'm pleased to inform you that your witness compensation has been approved." The amount is $12,500,000. Gabriel couldn't speak. He just stared at the number written on the official document the prosecutor slid across the desk. After taxes and fees, you'll net approximately $8 million, the prosecutor continued. The money will be transferred to an account in your name within 30 days. $8 million. Gabriel felt tears streaming down his face, not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming, soul-shaking relief. Hope's surgery was scheduled for the following month using the best insurance money could buy. The doctor said it would fix her heart completely, giving her a normal life, a chance to run and play and grow old. But Gabriel didn't just use the money for himself. The first thing he did was establish the Hope and Solomon Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping cover medical costs for families of children with life-threatening heart conditions. Then, he went back to St. Peter's Wharf. He bought the small, struggling shipyard at the edge of the marina, the one that had always turned him down for jobs, and reopened it under a new name. There, he started a trade school for at-risk youth, teaching them welding and marine mechanics, just as his father, Solomon, had taught him. His final project was the Lazarus. Over the next year, he poured his time and a piece of his fortune into it. He restored the engines until they hummed, polished the steel until it gleamed, and rebuilt the interior with warm wood and bright lights. The old, forgotten ship became the floating classroom for his school, a symbol for every student that no matter how rusted or broken something seems, it can always have a second chance. On a warm summer evening, Gabriel stood on the deck of the restored ship with Hope, now 10 years old and running without ever losing her breath. They watched the sun set over the harbor, painting the sky in colors of promise. "You fixed it, Daddy," Hope said, her voice filled with awe. Gabriel smiled, pulling her close. "We did, baby girl," he said, looking out at the horizon. "We did." He remembered the shipyard, the boat owners who'd mocked him, the community that had written him off. He remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, underestimated, and forgotten. He bought the struggling shipyard at the edge of St. Peter's Wharf, the entire property, for cash. The previous owner, facing bankruptcy, nearly cried when Gabriel made the offer. Gabriel renovated the place, fixing the dry docks, upgrading the equipment, and creating affordable slips for working-class sailors who couldn't afford the fancy yacht clubs. He established the Hope and Solomon Foundation Trade School on site, offering free training in welding and marine mechanics to at-risk youth, a partnership with the local community college. He hired his friend Marcus as the shipyard foreman, giving him a salary that finally reflected his skills. And the Lazarus, the ship that had started everything? The FBI returned it after the trial concluded. Gabriel finished the restoration, pouring love and labor into every inch. When it was done, gleaming and powerful and running perfectly, he didn't sell it. It became the floating classroom for his school, a symbol that no matter how rusted or broken something seems, it can always have a second chance. The transformation of the shipyard became a story in itself. What had once been a rundown facility where forgotten boats came to die became a thriving community hub. Gabriel didn't just fix the physical infrastructure, he rebuilt the culture. He created mentorship programs where experienced tradesmen taught newcomers. He established scholarship funds for young people who wanted to pursue maritime careers. He hired mechanics who'd been turned away from other shops because they didn't fit the mold, women, minorities, people with criminal records who deserved a chance to prove themselves. He paid them well, treated them with respect, and watched them bloom under the simple gift of being valued. The man who'd once counted pennies at the grocery store now found himself writing checks through his foundation for thousands of dollars to help families in crisis. When he heard about a single mother struggling to keep her boat, which she lived on with her 2 kids, he quietly paid off her slip fees for a year. When a retired fisherman needed engine work he couldn't afford, Gabriel's shop did it for free. Word spread. People came from all over to see the shipyard that the silver ship man had built. They came expecting something fancy, something flashy. Instead, they found a place that felt like home. A place where your past didn't define you, and where hard work mattered more than pedigree. Hope thrived in ways Gabriel had only dreamed of. After the surgery, her energy seemed boundless. She joined the track team at her new school. She made friends easily, her natural warmth drawing people to her. She started a YouTube channel about marine life, posting videos and facts about dolphins and whales that she researched at the library. One Saturday afternoon, almost 2 years after finding the silver, Hope came to Gabriel with a request. "Daddy, there's a boy in my class named Leo. His mom works really hard, but they don't have much money. Leo told me he's never been on a boat. Can we take him out on one of the school boats?" Gabriel looked at his daughter and saw the compassion in her eyes, the same empathy that had kept him going through the darkest times. "Of course, we can, baby. Invite him and his mom this weekend." That Saturday, Gabriel took Leo, his mother Maria, and Hope out on a small launch from the school's fleet. Maria, a woman who worked 2 jobs as a hospital custodian, was nervous at first. "I've never done this before," she admitted. "Never even been on a boat this small." "Neither had I until I was a boy," Gabriel said with a warm smile. "My father taught me. Now, I'm teaching you." They spent the afternoon on the water, the sun warm on their faces, the wind carrying the smell of salt and freedom. Gabriel taught Maria the basics of boat handling, let her take the wheel, and watched her face light up with joy and surprise at her own capability. Leo and Hope sat at the bow, their legs dangling over the side, laughing at something only they found funny. As they headed back to the marina, Maria pulled Gabriel aside. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do this. You don't even know us." Gabriel looked from the grateful mother to their children, still laughing together at the bow. He thought of the silver, the fear, and the impossible choice he'd faced. "A few years ago," he said, his voice deep and steady, "a lot of people helped me when I needed it most. I'm just passing it on. We're all in the same water, just trying to stay afloat." "I know what it's like to feel stuck," Gabriel said, his voice low and rumbling. "To feel like the world is moving forward and you're just drowning in the wake. Someone gave me a chance once. Actually, a lot of people gave me chances. I'm just passing it forward." Maria wiped her eyes. "Leo told me about your story, about the silver and everything. You could have moved away, gone somewhere fancy. Why did you stay here?" Gabriel looked around at the shipyard, at the vessels bobbing gently in their slips, at the young men and women working on engines and welding steel. "Because this is where I'm supposed to be," he said. "This is where I learned what I'm made of. Why would I leave?" A year after finding the silver, Gabriel stood on the upper deck of the shipyard's main office, watching the sun set over the harbor. Hope was beside him, healthy now, her heart beating strong and steady, her cheeks glowing with life. They'd moved into a real house with a big backyard and a porch swing. Hope had friends at school, hobbies, a future. "Daddy," Hope asked, leaning on the railing, "do you ever think about the silver?" Gabriel smiled, resting his large hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes. But you know what? The silver didn't save us, baby girl. We saved ourselves. The silver just helped us get to where we already deserved to be." A young man walked down the dock below, maybe mid-20s, carrying a battered toolbox. He looked nervous, uncertain. Gabriel recognized that look. He'd worn it himself not so long ago. "Excuse me," the young man called up. "I'm looking for Gabriel King. I heard he runs this place." "That's me," Gabriel said, leaning over. "My name's Caleb. I'm a welder, or I'm trying to be. I heard you have a program for people learning marine trades. Is there still space?" Gabriel looked at Hope, then back down at Caleb. He saw himself in this young man's eyes. The hunger, the determination, the fear that maybe he wasn't good enough. "There's always space," Gabriel said. "When can you start?" "Now," Caleb replied, straightening his posture. "I can start right now." Gabriel laughed, a warm sound that echoed off the steel hulls. "Then come on up. Let's get to work." Because that's what Gabriel King did. He worked. He built. He refused to quit even when the world told him he should. He took a $2,500 gamble on a condemned cruise ship and turned it into an $8 million future. But more importantly, he turned desperation into determination, fear into faith, and struggle into strength. The story of Gabriel King isn't really about finding silver. It's about finding yourself. It's about realizing that sometimes the treasure we're searching for is already inside us, waiting to be uncovered. It's about the courage to keep working when everyone else has given up. It's about protecting what matters most, even when the cost is everything you have. Gabriel never forgot where he came from. He never forgot what it felt like to count pennies, to skip meals, to wonder if tomorrow would be the day he finally broke. And he never let himself become the kind of person who looks down on others who are fighting those same battles. Instead, he built ladders. He created opportunities. He proved that one man's courage could ripple outward, changing not just his own life, but an entire community. The shipyard became more than just a business. It became a symbol, proof that broken things could be fixed, that forgotten people could matter, that a single father with grease under his nails could build a kingdom on nothing but determination and heart. Tour groups started coming through, not to gawk at wealth, but to see what was possible when someone refused to accept their circumstances as their destiny. Gabriel started speaking at schools, at church groups, anywhere people needed to hear that their current situation wasn't their final destination. He told his story honestly, including the mistakes, the fear, the moments he wanted to give up. He didn't present himself as a hero. He presented himself as proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they found something worth fighting for. On the 3-year anniversary of buying the Lazarus, the shipyard held a celebration. Hundreds of people came. Former students of the trade school, boat owners, community members whose lives Gabriel had touched in ways big and small. There were speeches and gospel music and barbecue. But the moment that mattered most came when a shy teenager named Marcus Jr. approached Gabriel. "Mr. King," the boy asked, holding a wrench like it was a scepter. "My dad said you fixed a whole cruise ship by yourself. Is that true?" Gabriel looked at the boy, then at the massive white ship gleaming behind them, its name painted in bold, fresh letters, Second Chance. "No, son," Gabriel said softly, looking over at Hope, who was laughing with her friends. "I didn't do it by myself. I had a reason to keep going. And once you have that, you can fix anything." "Mr. King," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was in your first mechanic training class. I was failing out of school, getting into trouble, heading nowhere. But you gave me a chance. You taught me I was good at something. I just got accepted to the Merchant Marine Academy. Full scholarship." Gabriel's eyes filled with tears. He pulled this boy, this young man, really, into a bear hug, feeling the weight of what he'd built. Not the dry docks or the buildings or the bank account. The lives. The futures. The possibilities he'd created by refusing to let his own struggles define him. That night, after everyone had gone home and the shipyard was quiet again, Gabriel walked to the end of Dock C. He stood at slip 33, where the beautifully restored vintage cruise ship now sat, gleaming under the starlight. The slip where the Lazarus had become the Second Chance. The slip where his life had changed forever. He thought about the man he'd been 3 years ago, desperate, exhausted, out of options. He thought about the moment he decided to spend his last $2,500 on a ship everyone said was a floating coffin. He thought about finding that hidden boiler room compartment, about the fear and the hope and the impossible choice he'd faced. And he thought about the man he'd become. Not because of the money, but because of the journey. The moment he decided to cooperate with the FBI instead of running. The moment he'd chosen to testify, even when it was terrifying. The moment he decided to invest his reward not just in his own future, but in creating opportunities for others. Anyone can find treasure if they're willing to dig deep enough, work hard enough, and believe they deserve it. Gabriel King bought a rotting cruise ship for $2,500 and found $150 million in silver. But what he really found was himself. And in the end, that was worth more than all the silver in the world. Because for Gabriel, And for everyone brave enough to chase their own second chance, the greatest discovery isn't what you find in hidden compartments or secret walls. It's what you find in your own heart. When you refuse to give up. When you stand tall in the face of danger. When you protect the ones you love at any cost. When you turn pain into power and desperation into destiny. Gabriel King proved that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's an opportunity. An opportunity to surprise the world, to exceed expectations, to show that the people society overlooks are often the ones with the most to offer. He proved that a single father with grease-stained hands and an impossible dream could build an empire on nothing but determination and faith. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible true stories that will leave you inspired. Click to keep discovering with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the biggest treasures are hidden in the places nobody else thinks to look.